Today is April 9th, 2025. The theme of this video is the implementation of a 100% tariff. What further moves do China and the United States have, respectively? White House spokesperson Leavitt confirmed on the 8th that the cumulative tariff of up to 100% on China will take effect immediately on the 9th. I said yesterday that this has become meaningless. At a 54% tariff level, there's already no business to be done. Adding another 50% is completely pointless. Is there any essential difference between a 54% tariff and a 100% tariff? There's no difference at all. If there has to be a difference, it's that if the tariff rate was lower, Trump could still collect some money. But in the current situation, he won't receive a single cent. For him now, forget about TikTok for the time being, and also forget about visiting China within 100 days. In fact, this is already a quasi-decoupling of economic and trade relations between China and the United States. It's just like that mineral agreement of his. It's no longer sustainable. What comes next is no longer just a matter of economic and trade. Trump needs to prove to the MAGA supporters his toughness. China also needs to demonstrate to other countries our fighting spirit and establish sufficient prestige and trust. It is expected that after the 100% tariff is implemented, China will announce countermeasures. Firstly, significantly increase tariffs on US agricultural products such as soybeans and sorghum. Secondly, ban the import of US poultry. Thirdly, suspend the Sino-US cooperation on fentanyl. Fourthly, take countermeasures in the field of trade and services. Fifthly, ban US movies. Sixthly, investigate the intellectual property benefits obtained by US enterprises in China. The specific amount of countermeasures is really something to look forward to. Adding 50% is simply telling Trump that no matter what card you play, we will follow, and we want to see what other cards you have. If it's increased to 51, that would be a pure humiliation to Trump. Well, Trump wants to use tariffs as a bargaining chip to force China, Japan, South Korea, and Europe to move some high-quality enterprises to the United States. Once the enterprises are moved to the US can obtain dollars. Then the US will short the dollar and make it depreciate. The US wants to give up the dollar hegemony to solve the US debt problem. He has a good plan, but China's resistance has ruined his plan. No wonder he's furious. After Trump announced the retaliatory measures, the US stock market turned from rising to falling, which is not unexpected. However, the market also needs a certain amount of time to reprice the sudden decoupling between China and the United States. Currently, in the global market, there are signs of a liquidity crunch. Gold, crude oil, major futures, and US stocks are all affected. All assets denominated in US dollars are being sold off. Why? Because of the shortage of US dollars. Some need to replenish margin after the pledged assets plummet. Some are forced to redeem due to restricted cross-border capital flows. Some hedge funds are forced to close positions to fill the hole in US stocks, and some are simply for hedging purposes. At this moment, the market is not about choosing what to sell, but about what can be sold. So you'll see that gold is falling, bonds are falling, and crude oil is also falling. It's not that they can't hedge risks, but they are too easy to be sold, and they are the best cash substitutes with good liquidity. From this perspective, there is actually no systemic risk in the share market because it cannot be priced in US dollars. This is a typical case of US dollar liquidity drying up. So what will happen next? If there is a black swan event, for example, if China imposes taxes and conducts investigations on all US trade and services, and Trump overreacts and makes an irrational choice, or if a large hedge fund collapses, eventually the liquidity crunch will intensify and turn into a liquidity crisis. The so-called tariffs on other countries are actually a kind of imperial special tax, a dividend tax of the US military hegemony. It's just a case of calling a deer a horse and testing the stance of other small countries. The so-called of manufacturing is impossible. Currently, the industrial foundation of the United States is in the military and financial sectors. As long as the world is thrown into chaos, it will be beneficial to Trump. This may lead to the restructuring of the supply chain. At the same time, he will suppress allies such as Europe, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and Canada, and influence countries like India, Brazil, and Turkey. He will try his best to win over Vietnam and Indonesia to form a containment circle against China. After China's retaliation, for Trump, in addition to direct tariffs, he may introduce the concept of secondary tariffs. That is, for all countries as long as the industrial chain, raw materials, and components come from China, they will be newly taxed or required to jointly impose tariffs on China to offset certain costs. Then he will require Chinese concept stocks to be compulsorily delisted or transferred to other markets. Regarding US Treasury bonds, he will try every means to cancel as many as possible. Of course, he may also cancel certain preferential policies for Hong Kong. After foreign capital withdraws, he may short the share market. As for China, in addition to selling a large number of US Treasury bonds and US stocks and repatriating gold, strengthening the construction of the RMB payment system, and significantly reducing tariffs on Europe, Japan, and South Korea, or even unilaterally implementing zero tariffs are all possible options. In the past 2 days, overseas Chinese language self-media have been shouting that China has made wrong responses, that China is finished and will collapse soon. I would like to state my opinion again. China will not collapse. China currently only has problems with the distribution system. As long as this problem is solved, capital will naturally flow in. China itself is a huge market. As long as consumption picks up, just because the United States doesn't want it doesn't mean international capital doesn't want it. I've always felt that overseas Chinese language self-media haven't realized one thing. The America of the rednecks and the America of the capital and the middle class are not the same America. The gap between these two Americas is no shallower than the gap between New York and third world countries. For rednecks, they become unemployed right after graduating from high school. Either they indulge in alcohol and drugs and become like zombies, or they join gangs and one day die in a homicide case or simply disappear. For these people, the luxurious and indulgent lives in Washington, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Las Vegas are as distant as the sun. For rednecks, a lose-lose situation is better than a win-lose situation. As long as they can make life difficult for the economically prosperous blue states like California, they will feel balanced. But for the capital and the middle class, they have enjoyed the benefits of globalization for so many years. The international alliances formed by capital can reach any corner of the earth and exert their influence. They can make money when there is peace and development, and they can still make money when there is war. And all of this depends on the US military hegemony and financial hegemony. How can it be okay for you, Trump, to undermine the foundation of the United States? So, don't be so one-sided when looking at problems. What's the benefit if China collapses? Are you happy if Chinese people have to live a hard life and are as hungry as the people in North Korea? Don't always bring up those posts of the surrenderists. Most of the people who say those things have their own interests involved, such as in the stock market or related industries. We can understand their feelings. After all, they are speaking from their own positions. You may be very frustrated, but have you really collapsed over all these years? Whether Trump is beneficial to the United States or not is a matter for the United States. But it is certain that he is harmful to China. I really don't understand why a group of Chinese people, especially those within China, support Trump's stance. For those Chinese people living overseas, aren't you afraid of being deported? Even if you're not deported, given the madness of MAGA, will Trump establish air concentration camps in the United States like the implementation of the 1966 Act and target Trump supporters? I find it even more strange for those who support Trump. He has imposed tariffs to disrupt our economy, and you will have to live a hard life. Do you think living a hard life is like losing weight? I really don't understand what you're thinking. Leaving aside this meaningless 50% tariff increase, the previous 54% tariff has already eaten up the profit margins of the vast majority of businesses. Is this something you can just surrender to? How can you surrender? Do you want us to cut our flesh to feed the vultures and support the rednecks in the United States at a loss? I have already analyzed the further moves that China and the United States will have, respectively, after the 104% tariff is implemented. But this is only on a rational level, and these are still moves within the tariff field. The future confrontation will surely rise to other fields such as politics and military. What Trump launched is not a tariff war, but extortion in the name of a tariff war. As long as China shows signs of weakness, the extortion will double. This forces China to fight back on an equal footing because there is no way back. There will be no broad future if we retreat. There will only be complete ruin. In my opinion, if the Republican Party can still win the midterm elections and still control both the Senate and the House of Representatives, it is highly likely that China and the United States will enter a Cold War, and it is not impossible for a hot war to break out. When it comes to a hot war, we have to mention Taiwan. Many people think there will be a war, but in my view, Taiwan is safer now than at any other time. In order to win over Japan, South Korea, and Europe, China is unlikely to start a war with Taiwan. Of course, we cannot rule out the possibility of Lai taking the initiative to provoke. But I think this possibility is also small. Lai is just a bit timid now, but he's not stupid. In my opinion, whether Taiwan will completely side with the United States or with China in the future is a painful choice they have to make, and they won't make this choice for the time being. Why? Because the China's trade war has just begun. No one can say for sure whether a globalization centered on the United States or a semi-globalization centered on China and Europe will be formed in the future. Before there is a clear tendency in the situation, Taiwan will not make a choice. Will there be a war in Taiwan? In fact, this danger exists at any time because we all understand the situation. But because of the economic and trade relations, I currently think that a war is precisely unlikely to break out. After the 100% tariff is implemented, in addition to the moves I just analyzed in the economic and trade field between China and the United States, what remains is the confrontation in politics, military, economy, and technology. There won't be anything else. So will it come to a full-scale Cold War? We can't say for sure now, because under Trump's governance, the United States can do anything, and China has nowhere to retreat now. This is the reality we have to face. That is to say, starting from the 9th, our lives will be changed. That's all for today's topic. Goodbye.